Ladies and gentlemen, this is WeatherBrains, episode number 507, the pre-show, October 5th, 2015. This is James. This is the time of the show where some of us share boring personal stories, occasionally say things that are funny, and we always say things that are outrageous. So welcome, the absurd. The official show begins in about 10 minutes. So there you go.
Or 20 or 25.
Or 30.
Whatever.
Yeah,
whenever
we get to Aubrey's back.
Whenever we get around to it.
Aubrey's been away for a while, and it's been like it's like the 7th grade locker room when she's not here. The boys just go wild, and now we are calm, we're thoughtful, and
well, things have changed around my house. My younger brother moved in.
What?
Wow.
Yep.
Cool.
So
you're in a different spot. I can tell.
For that.
The fellow
Yeah.
we met, Aubrey, when we were up.
yeah, absolutely, yes, it was. So my husband and my younger brother, and thankfully they get along. But it is kind of like a boys' locker room around here sometimes, especially when they get to be playing around with this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they probably sit in the corner and watch baseball and make fart noises and do guy things. So I feel for you. I'm very sorry. I apologize for these two guys.
We actually went to the Baltimore Yankees game last night.
Saw some pictures on Twitter.
Game of the season.
Yep, last game of the season, and the only unfortunate thing was it was a little breezy, and we were just barely under the overhang. And with the breeze, it created just enough of a wind tunnel that we were freezing our butts off.
Uh-oh.
So
show title.
So I had the hoodie, wrapped tight, but it was fun. It was a good game, and we looked around the 8th inning. So once we found out the Astros lost, we were like, all right, that's good. We're good. So.
Camden,
So if the Astros had won and the Yankees won, would there have been a play-in game?
I don't know. All I know, we were playing for home turf, the Yankees, and they were not playing very well.
I had 68 strikeouts in our fantasy baseball league yesterday to come in second, by the way.
I was still 10th. Span suspenders disappointed me, but I think I did really good in batting. I think I did good in batting. So
I pitched every pitcher yesterday and had 68 strikeouts to go to first place in strikeouts and win.
Well, lucky
Or
you.
win, come in second, I guess. Sean Wright would take.
I think Bill is playing that sports king thing.
Hey, did you see that? They finally
have
broken some scandal about it. Did you see that? Because I've never played it. I've been waiting for them to bust this stuff.
I think Bill's been betting $10,000 a weekend on fantasy sports.
I won $350,000 yesterday on the strikeouts.
that doesn't. We're flying to Aruba.
That's what happens. Some guy used insider information to place a bet. I've never even played.
So you're saying this thing is a scam?
Well, I mean that's the same as insider trading. If he did it,
wow,
he used the information before it was publicly available.
And for the lawyers that just heard that, I didn't say it's a scam. Bill did. Call 1-800-SCAM.com.
It was the New York Times that said it was a scam, I think.
So we got Dr. Doswell on the show this week. This is great. See, I don't have to say.
Hey, James. Before we get started, he wants to have dinner Sunday night with any of us that want to go. Is that still on your schedule? Is that possible?
I'd love to, man.
Anyone can chopper me in, I'm in.
I'll send you a note about when I get there. I'll have to look at I have not even looked at the flight schedule. I'll send you a note. I would love to do that.
Yeah, he asked me today on the test hangout if we would have dinner with him Sunday night in Oklahoma.
Oh, boy, that would be like awesome.
I thought we cannot miss that opportunity.
But having Chuck on the show is great. I feel like I don't have to say anything outrageous because it's coming from him.
He'll take care of it.
It's great. I mean, I always feel pressured to be the outrageous guy, and especially Kevin's not on here. And if Kevin's not on, it's got to be me. And I'm not a good, what do we call a guy? The exterminator, accelerant.
As Chuck has gotten older, though, he's softened a little bit. He's not like he was when I first met him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's true of most everybody.
He was awful nice to me during this Google Hangout today, because guys, I'm telling you, it is just like having your wisdom teeth cut out. And
except Kevin, he's getting crankier with age.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was so nice to me during this hangout. I was so thankful because I figured he was going to be so frustrated. He did great.
Well,
The
Nate
secret
Johnson
is if you
is
have a
funny.
Mac, it's simple.
Scuba.
We should require all guests to have a Mac.
yeah, I don't.
Is Chuck a Mac person?
Yeah.
All right. I like him even better.
So who just hung up on us? That was
Nate.
Nate.
It was Nate.
Boy, he
I
saw
said-
this and he ran. He's I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I said something about scuba, and he took off.
Scooby-Doo.
And I have invited both Morgan and Chuck. So we'll see how we got 3 minutes to showtime here. How's the pack doing, John?
Oh, 4-0, man. 4-0.
Woo! Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, he still hasn't thrown an interception since 2012 at home. Amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. Now down here, the Atlanta Falcons are undefeated, which is interesting. And I saw the Bengals are undefeated.
Yeah, there's 6 teams, I think.
Yeah. There's several that have gone 4-0 so far. Yeah.
Jacksonville being one. Can you believe that? Jacksonville is undefeated.
No way.
How's T.J. Yeldon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the Carolina Panthers, not Jacksonville.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll
That makes more
buy
sense.
that.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Even I know that.
I'm in the southeast, but I couldn't figure out which state we were in.
Yeah. 2 states off, John. No problem.
You were close, John. You're close.
Oh, well, yeah.
So, Brian, have you seen our new set?
No, I haven't.
Is it
Pretty
public
spectacular?
consumption?
I'm under an NDA. I can't talk about it.
Oh.
I can't go in there and take pictures. I can't Periscope. I don't even want to go in there. So
I thought they were going to have it done in like 72 hours or something. What's the deal?
no
5 days. It was done Friday, supposedly.
This is like 5. What? This Friday?
No, last Friday.
That's what I've heard. I thought.
No, I don't think it's going on the air until later this month.
No, I didn't say going on the air. They had from Monday till Friday to build it.
Let's see.
Well, maybe it's. I will go in there and peek in there.
That's what I thought Brian said last week on the show.
But the
That's
one
what
thing
I was told.
The one thing that's so weird. That studio is huge. I mean, it's
Yeah, when you take out all that other stuff we had
it's
and see how far
massive.
from the walls it really was.
I mean, we got room we've never had. All right, so let me invite Chuck again. This is not good.
No, that's not good.
We built this thing up now.
We'll get him. Oh, I'll call him in a
The
second.
only
While
reason I
you're
came
trying to
back.
get him, let me share something.
That's
with
right.
you.
Oh, come
I
on.
told
Come
him
on,
that.
Aubrey. You came back
I'm
for
just
us.
kidding. I did. I missed you guys. It's been a rough month. So
Shoot,
Happy
I'd have
to be
put a
back.
bomb in that shirt.
John is showing something from web.mail.comcast.net.
Yeah, can you see this?
I
Yes.
can't.
It's a radar.
Radar.
Oh,
loop.
I see.
Yeah. Now,
Looks like I'm seeing
watch what
Pennsylvania,
goes right over
Maryland.
Lancaster County. This was last Tuesday night between 11:30 and 1:30 a.m. No warning on this. So I get up Wednesday morning and I understand the main highway that runs just north of Lancaster was closed, and there's parts of a warehouse across the highway, and there are trees down. There's power outages. So later that morning, actually it was in the afternoon, I went up with the Pennsylvania State Police and the Weather Service, and we surveyed this. We got an EF1 that came through here at about 12:40 a.m. So I
There
get
was-
up Wednesday morning, and I understand the main highway that runs just north of Lancaster was closed, and there's parts of a warehouse. Why am I hearing myself now? The highway, and there are trees down. That's bizarre. Power outages.
That's weird.
I actually was going on here?
Just to recap, in case you're just joining us,
They came through here at about 12:40 a.m.
It all got weird when Chuck showed up.
Yeah.
Boy, this is getting funky.
Well, we got to find
Show
Chuck
title.
too, bud.
Where am I hearing myself now? Highway.
That's a good question.
Why am I hearing myself?
We said that was a good question, John.
Hey,
to
hey,
recap,
Chuck, say something.
joining us.
I'm here
Yeah.
Good, we see you.
and hear you.
Let me see where this funky audio is coming from. Boy, it sounds like we're in a toilet now.
That's a good question.
Okay, yeah, somehow we're getting feedback down Chuck's audio channel. I muted Chuck, and the feedback stopped. So, Chuck, if you got some these headphones or something, if you can plug those in, that'll probably kill that problem.
It's because Bill got cocky and said there would be no problems with that.
There would be no problems. That was famous last words.
I just said
Another
it was
show
the best
title.
Best hangout ever. That's all.
Yeah. Hey, Morgan, can you hear us? Oh, Morgan.
He's got headphones, earphones.
We have to lower the octave of our voice, you know.
He's got headphones.
Yes, this is Morgan Palmer
Only
in
respond to
Seattle.
types of people.
Does Morgan work for the Jabroni channel up there? No. What the Jabroni's on some stations in Seattle. Hey, Morgan, he can't hear a word you're saying. Yeah.
Which ones are we talking about?
As a matter of fact, we are now on the cable, so I've just lost my job. So it's been nice working with you guys. I just looked up and realized that we're on television. So for those watching on the James Spann 24/7, welcome. And
good night.
Yeah, and good night.
And goodbye.
I'll be down at the Arby's working the night shift starting tomorrow.
Yeah, hit the clock, Span.
Yeah, so Morgan is having some problems up in Seattle, and we got to get Chuck on here, and then we'll get this thing started.
What's his station?
Cairo.
So which one does Sinclair own up there? Well, I honestly don't know. If he could hear us, he would tell us.
They've got one up there, but I can't figure out which one it is.
Nate says it's not Cairo.
KOMO or KUNS?
Oh, that was.
I'm hearing people laughing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my brother and my husband. They have
those two boneheads need to stop.
Yeah. My neighbor could actually hear my brother laughing from inside their home.
Wow.
That's how loud his laugh
Kick them out in the yard. I mean, we're trying to produce some high quality audio here.
Yeah.
Hey, Chuck, try it now.
Yeah. I had the program going on another window.
Okay, this is. I will say I have never seen Dr. Doswell without the hat on a program like this.
He did the recording. He did our anniversary recording without a hat.
Well, that's true. Wow, is this a new look you're going to, or what?
No, not particularly. I don't wear the hat all the time, and especially when I'm at home.
That became the show title that night too.
Yeah. Just the Burt Reynolds line. Take it off for one thing.
To answer your question, James, KOMO and KUNS are the two stations.
Who does Morgan work for?
Cairo.
So he doesn't work for the Sinclair.
He doesn't work for the Sinclair.
Okay. Well, let's get this thing started.
And you may not work for Sinclair either.
No, I was about to say, I'll be at Arby's working the night shift starting tomorrow night. It's been great.
I would like curly fries, please.
Yeah, been a marvelous run. Let's get this thing started here. Let's see here. Let me turn on recorder number 1 and recorder number 2. And I'm also on their, Wi-Fi internet pipe, so they might just disconnect me here. All right, so here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! Time to talk weather. This is WeatherBrains episode number 507 for October 5th, 2015. I just feel under my bones. This is going to be a really good show tonight. I feel it in my bones. Brian, do you feel it in your bones? Brian Peters, the retired government meteorologist.
I do. And there's been so much weather going on, my bones are kind of tired.
Yeah, great. So, Brian, you have been in. Let's see, what you been doing this weekend? Sleeping?
Well, no. Most of what I've been doing this weekend is following Joaquin.
Yeah, there's a lot of weather to talk about. We got all kind of things going on here.
And then following all the idiots in South Carolina who think they can drive through flooded areas.
No. For those in South Carolina listening to the show, the email address is brian@brianpeters.com.
We love all of you except you idiots. Well, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. There's this guy in this white pickup truck goes boring into the water, and then 5 rapid water rescue people have to risk their necks to save him. I say let him drown.
Whoa.
Wow, what is up with Brian's got a burr up his backside tonight?
Yes. I'm having a rant about flash flooding.
So this before we even get to Chuck, it's getting out of hand here.
And then what about all those people who think this whole event in South Carolina wasn't forecast well? Where are they?
Yeah, and I'll say this. I got this day off to a bad start. So I had these, I get up at like 4:52. You come downstairs, and all these guys were on social media telling me that, this was a United States government, with weather modification and HARP and chemtrails.
Oh, no!
No, in fact, they steered the hurricane into South Carolina that produced all the rain. And my head almost blew up by 5 a.m. on a Monday, and I'm cranky enough as it is. So, Dr. John, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't get it. I thought this was well forecast, don't you? I mean, I thought it was well forecast. Everything worked.
The QPF, 4 days in advance, had a bullseye of 18 or 19 inches over central South Carolina. I mean, WFP nailed this.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And let me again, I'm going to get Bill to bring in our guest very quickly because I can't wait to hear what Dr. Chuck has to say. But Aubrey Urbanowitz is back. So it's been really rough, for the last few weeks when you've been out. All these creepers, these old men that won't watch the show or listen to the show when you're there. I'll never listen to that again. She's not on there anymore. So she's coming back. So,
that's
ladies and gentlemen,
she's
back. Welcome back.
I'm back. Thank you. It's been a trying month, and we've been busy. And unfortunately, the weather prevented us from doing a huge festival this weekend. But thankfully, it's gotten rescheduled to this coming weekend. So we'll see.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here. Kevin Selly, are you cranky this evening?
I'm actually kind of excited. It appears that we're going to be live in 2 weeks in Norman, and I won't have to be cranky because Brian is.
Yay!
I won't be cranky in 2 weeks.
I can just come and coast, apparently.
The beautiful thing about this show, though, with Chuck on the show, I don't think anybody feels the need to say anything outrageous because he will before it's all over. So it's like the pressure's off. And let me see if Morgan, can you hear us? Morgan Palmer in Seattle.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh boy!
Oh yes.
Golden pipes, the best voice in meteorology. This guy, it should be illegal to sound like this.
Let's sign him up as the official WeatherBrains announcer.
Well, Tony Rice has grabbed him. Rice is the introduction for Tony.
Well, and if I ever get around to producing the open for the news piece, I'll have his voice on it as well. But I saw his new IDs for his new station, and their voice guy doesn't sound as good as Morgan does.
I haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah, same station, but new
breaking
IDs.
News, right, Morgan?
But their voice guy doesn't sound as good. Morgan, you need to be doing the IDs.
You can go into a movie theater and the trailer guys aren't as good as Morgan. All these TV stations, the news opens, they're not as good. This guy has the best pipes in the industry. So
say it, Morgan. Give us a movie trailer. In a world where? Come on.
In a world.
In a world where Monday came far too soon.
That's chills. I'm buying tickets. Where's
right,
Fandango? Let me buy tickets.
Bill Murray, bring in our guest, so that we can get this thing. I'm excited.
Sir, Mr.
I have a million questions for Dr. Chuck.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I'll take the rest of the night off, and you two can talk, James. But tonight's guest WeatherBrain needs no introduction to this audience. It's his 4th appearance on the show. Dr. Chuck Doswell, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be back.
And we're coming your way in a couple of weeks. We're looking forward to it. You picked out a good spot for us to maybe consume a few adult beverages.
Absolutely. Maybe more than a few.
There you go.
All right.
All right. We'll have a chocolate milk with a beer chaser for Dr. John.
That's me, man.
All right. Good. Well, we can't wait to have you on the show. Let me introduce Morgan, and we'll get back to you. But tonight's guest panelist is no stranger to the show either. He's a two-time winner of the James Spann Best Pipes Award. He's a morning meteorologist at Cairo and Seattle. Be moving to evenings, breaking news, as the chief meteorologist starting Monday, October the 12th. Morgan Palmer, welcome back.
Woohoo! Hey there, thanks a lot. Good to be on, and great to be on with Dr. Doswell. Always been a huge fan of his ever since I was a younger tyke growing up in Texas, thinking about going out and trying to do something crazy, and that's drive around and look at storms.
Crazy idea indeed.
See, what Chuck doesn't know is how many of us guys he's roped into this. I mean, he's responsible for all of us.
Oh.
To the madness.
So yeah, if you got a problem with me and Morgan and some of these guys, it's his fault. So he's our hero.
Love to take credit for you, James.
I used to read your papers, these preprints, in my little room when I was about 19, 20 years old, and to think that I would ever meet this guy, it's just stunning. I mean, if you want to know anything about severe local convective storms, you go see this guy. And I still have a million questions about severe local convective storms. They're a mystery in so many ways. But I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. Remember a nice barbecue dinner at the Little Dewey in Starkville too, James.
Oh yeah, no, we shared a meal at let's see, Pap's Place in Ackerman, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Which might be one of the greatest meat and threes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't have fried okra though.
Yeah, that was kind of strange. But
yeah,
no, it's
very strange.
So Dr. Doswell, we thought we were off your Christmas list after the Mike Morgan show a year and a half or so ago.
I don't hold a grudge. I just think you screwed it up. That's all.
Yeah, tell us what we could have done better.
Well, I mean, you let him off the hook. You were too nice to him. You didn't confront him when he was there. You didn't give him a chance to respond to the things you said afterwards. So I felt like you kind of dropped the ball on that one.
I think we were a bunch of jabronis. I agree.
You know, that's neither here nor there. The fact that you might not do exactly what I want doesn't mean I've become your enemy.
Well, just hang on. So
see, he has softened up. I told you. I told you.
Yeah. By the way, Dr. John Scola alleges that you're a softer man now, Chuck.
Yeah, I'm just a pussycat.
I wouldn't go that far.
So we had Mike Morgan on the show of KFOR. He's the chief meteorologist for the NBC channel in Oklahoma City, and this was after the El Reno tornado. And we just wanted him to share his side of coverage that night, and he came out, and the episode was 404, as I recall, which is the code you get when you go to a website that's not there, 404. If you want to go back and watch that or listen to that, and he had these, handheld cards, and he was very on the defense.
He came out swinging.
Well, he had to be on the defensive because basically he screwed up big time.
Right. So I was going to say, so if he was here, what would you say to him?
Well, I'd like him to explain to me why he did what he did and what rationale would justify telling people to get in their cars and drive south. That was a really stupid thing to say.
And again, he had all these cards, and remember that he was holding up these signs, and he kind of tried to justify that. And I would not advise people to do that. But here's my thing that bothers me. We got to be on the same page, because it seems to me you get these bewildering comments on what you're supposed to do during a tornado and some of these things. Like you got one guy saying drive south, one guy saying you have to be underground to survive, then another guy saying you can be above ground, just be in a small room. What do we do about this problem?
The weather wars in Oklahoma City are a nightmare. I can't even imagine what ordinary citizens who don't know anything about severe weather, how they expect anyone to deal with that effectively. They're getting conflicting messages from stations that are all trying to outcompete each other for viewership. And they've gotten really outrageous at times. And I'm sorry, but Mike has become kind of the bad guy of the three major stations. He's done the most outrageous things, in my opinion, in the last couple of years. And Gary England, who used to be the bad guy, has become the soul of conservatism now. Of course, he's sort of retired right now, but I gotta believe he's still influential in the way things are done at the station.
And Oklahoma City is one of the most aggressive. It is the most aggressive severe weather market in the country. Everybody in television weather watches what goes on out there. If you could wave your magic wand and get them to do what's right, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that, first of all, they should all be on the same page and not be sending out conflicting messages. They shouldn't be just winging it on the fly. They're doing these on what do you call it, wall-to-wall segments where there's no adverts. They just keep broadcasting weather. And frankly, for a significant fraction of that time, they're sort of struggling about what the hell do I say to fill the airtime?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff they come up with is nonsense.
Give us a good example.
Well, like the Drive South example.
Okay.
That was just a dumb thing to say. And if he really believed it, I can at least empathize with the notion that perhaps he had a misconception. But it was contributing to what could have been a terrible disaster.
Right.
Does that happen occasionally? Do the forecasters out there suggest to get in your car and drive away, or is that kind of a unique event?
That's what he did. I hope it won't become the industry standard in Oklahoma City. I would hope that people would, with all the hullabaloo over what Mike did, I think it's clear that there's probably, the word has been put out that that's not the right thing to do. So hopefully that won't continue.
I'll add to what Chuck said, if I may, because I wasn't here for that show, but I went back and listened to it for the first time only just a couple of months ago, and my impression from listening was that what's going on in that market is that it has become more about the show or the performance that they are putting on as opposed to severe weather coverage.
It's always been that way. It's been that way ever since I've been here. We call it the weather wars.
Right. Well, I don't see them up there, but like I said, from his comments, you could tell that it becomes a ratings in the moment is the number one thing, as opposed to the mission and information, and that just dovetails with what Chuck said about there are those down moments where what are you going to say, but
if I listen to James in severe weather situations, and I've done that a couple of times, basically the flow of information from him, even in relatively quiet periods, is always helpful. It's always directed toward helping people know where the threat is and what to do about it. And rather than winging it and saying wild things like drive south, he sticks to a basic core set of principles, and with his seemingly encyclopedic knowledge of the local geography, he can tell people in great detail what's going on and where. And everything I've heard him say in the times that I've watched him has always been spot on. So in my book, he's the poster child for what a weather broadcaster should be, and the guys in Oklahoma City are still too focused on the ratings game.
Let me just say this.
I feel obliged to point out here, and maybe this goes to Chuck's point, maybe it doesn't, but K4, Mike Morgan's station, won a national, not a regional, but a national Emmy for their coverage of the tornado on the 20th, so a week and a half before the Drive South event, if I'm getting all of my dates correct. So it's interesting to see that the same station, and again, maybe this goes, Chuck, to your point that it's just a ratings war and it's going crazy, but there are some folks in our industry, very high up in our industry, who think that the kind of coverage that they were doing is award-winning and should be elevated and raised up for the standard.
Yeah, but what's the measure for an Emmy? That's performance-based.
Right. There's good TV, and then there is good, responsible weather reporting, and they're not necessarily one and the same.
Let me suggest that the KSNW Topeka station that sent out that team that took the overpass video got an award for that video.
Yeah.
And that video is directly responsible for killing 3 people on 3 May 99.
Right.
So I'm not sure that awards from the industry are necessarily all that meaningful in terms of the actual value of what they're saying.
So how do we get those two things in line? How do we bring the industry to realize that good television, to try and find good television that is also scientifically based and quality information that will save lives and not put future lives at risk?
Well, I think the first and foremost issue is that you got to get TV off of the infatuation with the ratings game. And right now, I don't see any simple way to do that. They're going to reward anything that provides high ratings, and they don't really, the people who give these awards aren't necessarily in any way equipped to make a judgment about the actual validity of what people are saying. If they can have a high viewership and not totally screw it up, then I think awards are possible, even in situations where perhaps they're not due from at least from a scientific standpoint. I don't know how to infuse more science into broadcasting. I would have to defer to you guys to figure out how to do that. I think James is a good example of somebody who's done that. And if anybody's deserving of high-level awards, it's him. But, you know, they're not asking me for my vote.
Hey, Chuck, let me ask you this. You know, Gary England is kind of like, for most in the industry, he's like one of the icons, and you say you had an issue with him. What was your main issue with Gary when he was, you know, working weeknights and was not, you know, he was before his retirement?
Well, I'm not sure I want to go into all the dirt.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm serious. Some of this stuff is pretty ugly. Let me just suggest that Gary is perhaps not the most ethical person that you would want to work with. And if you work with him, watch your backside, because there's a good chance he's going to put a knife in it. I also get very frustrated with him because he likes to take credit for a lot of things that he really hasn't earned. If you listen to him and his acolytes, you know, he was the pioneer of Doppler radar, and he virtually invented everything to do with severe weather. Well, the fact of the matter is that he didn't do any of that. And all he's done is take credit for stuff that other people did. His getting credit for stuff, to me, takes away from the people who really did earn the respect of the community for those things. He's no Doppler radar expert. He's lucky if he can tell a PRF from a, I don't know, a rotation cycle, an RPM. You know, it's not obvious to me he knows anything.
I was going to say, my next question, you kind of answered that. I was going to say, so if you had Gary and Les Lemon, who would be your go-to guy?
You've got to be joking.
Yeah, really.
so like, I feel bad for even, you know.
Throw me a softball. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. I'd take Les Lemon in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Yeah, Les, of course, is a pioneer in Doppler radar. And he deserves far more credit than he's ever been given because he doesn't have a PhD.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
Well, yeah, it actually is, because it really hurt his career, and he ended up making some career decisions because he couldn't advance in the system without the right credentials. I've known almost no one who is better equipped to do research in severe storms than Les Lemon. And as far as I can tell, nobody's beating a path to his door to give him awards.
Wow.
Talk about those early days, Chuck, because those interest us. Because we were, like James said, reading all those papers that you guys wrote. Talk about those early days of research when you were using Doppler and unlocking the secrets of tornadoes.
Hey, Bill,
I still use today.
Hey, Bill, I want to go back even before that. I want to go back to you actually finished your undergraduate work at Wisconsin. Isn't that right, Chuck?
Yeah, that's right. 1967.
Right, and then you went to OU, and then you had this detour into
Vietnam.
Into Vietnam. How did that affect you and your career? That deployment?
Well, it probably delayed my getting my doctorate by about conservatively about 6 years. I mean, I was set to be done probably in 1970. And as it was with the 2.5-year delay plus all of the rest of the spin-up that I had to go through afterwards, it was 76 before I completed it. But as far as my career goes, I don't think it really had a big impact. There are many positive things that came out of my experiences in the military that had nothing to do with my professional life. I came back from military service more determined than ever to finish what I started. So that aspect of it just meant a couple of years delay.
And you spent some time at White Sands,
yeah.
Mexico, right? And that was related to atmospheric science, right?
Right. That's kind of a long story. I had a very good friend in Vietnam who encouraged me to send letters around the military to try to get a better deal for myself than being a message center clerk in Vietnam. And apparently my letters finally landed on the right desk, and I got reassigned. I was going to be working in the communications center at Fort Hood, Texas. They canceled those orders and sent me to White Sands instead. And I ended up working for a civilian scientist there, developing a two-dimensional fog model. I didn't really know anything about modeling, but I learned quite a bit in the process. And I felt like it was a good experience. I was not a very good soldier. As you can well imagine, I didn't take well to what I considered authority figures. And so I kind of pushed back a little bit. I'd like to think I was a pain in their side for however long. But eventually that all came to an end, and then I just went back to what I was doing. So it wasn't, it was not a crucial experience, but I would say that, you know, I'm still living certain aspects of my anger and frustration over Vietnam as a place to fight a battle between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. But that's another story. I don't want to go down that road. That's politics.
So Chuck, go back to my original question. Talk about those early days in research and share some memories with us of those days.
Well, when I got out of graduate school, my first job was to go to the Techniques Development Unit at the National Severe Storms Forecast Center in Kansas City, which was a unit that was programmed, if you will, to do research for the CELS unit, the predecessor to the Storm Prediction Center. And in fact, that was my dream job. When I was still in graduate school, I did some student trainee experiences in Kansas City, and I decided that what I wanted to do was to do research for the CELS unit, and that was a job that didn't exist. But after the big outbreak in '74, the so-called super outbreak, the powers that be decided that there needed to be a research unit at the Severe Storms Forecast Center. And so, like a ripe fruit falling into my hands as I walked through an orchard, that opportunity dropped into my lap the year I graduated. And so I got my dream job right out of grad school, which is pretty amazing. But I was working with Les, and we were tasked with something that was sort of unusual in an operational forecasting agency, to do research, and our bosses really didn't understand what it took to do research, so they were kind of at sea, but they were sort of frightened of us because, you know, we had PhDs and stuff and they didn't, and so somehow they were a little nervous. So they mostly left us alone, which I would call benign neglect. I used a lot of that time to actually read up on a lot of things. They had an extensive library, and I spent a lot of my time reading articles. And then I also did operational forecast shifts on the desk in cells. And in time, some ideas came to us. Working with Les was a real joy. Les and I had been friends sort of peripherally before, but when we both got to Kansas City, it was clear that we made a partnership that could potentially be very productive. As I said, Les was inherently one of the best researchers I've ever known. So working with him was a real joy. And, you know, we did a paper in 1979 that up until recently was my most cited published paper regarding mesocyclones and tornadogenesis. There are many aspects of that paper that are interesting, but perhaps only in a technical level. Perhaps a fun anecdote concerning it is that we had to get it reviewed 3 times. It was rejected the first 2 times it was reviewed.
Wow. What?
Yeah.
What? Somebody rejected you?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Well, I've been rejected more than a few times, James. Believe me. Yeah, but, you know, to find out that paper was so difficult to get published, I think is something of a surprise. And at the last, the one reviewer finally said, well, okay, I guess I'll grudgingly let this go. But he still had some problems with it. I'm pretty sure I know who that was, but I'm not going to say who. It was somebody who was actually later on a friend of mine. And we never talked about that paper, but I'm pretty sure he was the referee, the one who was giving us the most trouble. But, you know, then as luck would have it, after about 5 or 6 years, the job kind of went south, and my dream job turned sour. It's a long story, an accumulation of frustrations compelled me to leave my dream job and return to full-time research. But of course I returned to work with Bob Maddox in Boulder, the weather research program, which was an incredible opportunity. And of course I'll never regret having made that decision. Bob was a fantastic person to work with. He was perhaps the first person that I knew that I never had to explain myself to him. He understood where I was coming from, and I understood where he was coming from. And so our interactions tended to be rather sparsely populated with words because we didn't really have to talk very much. We understood each other so well. It was a real joy to work with Bob. That was probably one of the highlights of my career. And while I was there, I met Fernando Caracena, who's perhaps one of the most incredibly intelligent people I've ever met. A real pure scientist. He didn't like to publish because he considered reviewers to be like a cloud of gnats buzzing around your head. He didn't like to put up with that. So it was difficult to get him to publish things, but the guy was a genius. There's no two ways about it. And I also worked with Stan Barnes, who's relatively famous for having developed some objective analysis schemes. He had been at NSSL when I was a student in Norman. And Stan and Fernando and I would sit around in Stan's office. Stan was kind of a big shot, so he had a bigger office than either Fernando or I did. So we'd meet there, and we'd talk about various things, and it was just one of the more intellectually stimulating experiences of my whole life. It was a great time. So anyway, I could go on, but you know, you guys probably need a break at some point.
We've got all night, Chuck. So we only get you about every 2.5 years on the show. So we're thrilled to have you. But
you can have me as much as you want.
We may make you a permanent guest panelist. So just careful what you ask for. So I know. And speaking of that, you know, you were great on the High Instability Show with Gene Rode. Tell us about Gene and the show. Will it ever come back? And you know.
No, it won't come back. I'm very disappointed. R.J. Evans was the person who supported us. He invested a huge amount of money in the studio with all of the top-notch electronics and so forth to make the show work. And he paid for a high-speed internet connection. But all of his radio shows were unsponsored. And so eventually it got to the point where it was just too much money going out the door with nothing coming in, and he just couldn't afford to keep it going. Plus, I think Gene kind of ran out of steam at the end. He was having trouble finding people to be guests on the show, mainly because I think it was such an outspoken show that everybody was kind of afraid that they might lose their job if they appeared at their show.
Yeah, see, you think this show's bad? You mean you listen to? I mean, it was very interesting, but it was definitely on the edge. It was edgy.
Yeah, we as Gene advertised it as not your daddy's weather.
So does that mean this is your daddy's weather show here on WeatherBrains?
Well, it's a lot more subdued. Let's put it that way.
And it had much better bumper music, Chuck.
No let me jump in real quick. I want to ask Chuck this. I'm afraid I'll forget if I don't get these out now.
Sure.
So Chuck, at some point soon, you're probably going to hit the big 7-0, and
November.
Yeah. So looking back on this long, remarkable career, do you have any regrets?
None. Absolutely none.
There you go.
Good for you.
That's wonderful to hear.
I mean, a lot of people cannot say that honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you more.
Go.
How many people do you know that have had an opportunity actually to live their dream? Not very damn many.
Yep.
Okay, not only did I live my dream, but the reality was better than my dreams ever imagined. How many people do you know that can say that?
Well, not without the use of pharmaceuticals.
Well, I will admit I've sampled a few pharmaceuticals myself, but
show title. Yes.
Nothing to do with my assessment of my career. I never dreamed when I was a kid with some wild idea of becoming a meteorologist. I never imagined that I would end up with friends around the world and be invited to come and make presentations in front of big shots all around the world and so on, and receive any kind of recognition. I never imagined any of that. I never dreamed that. My dream wasn't big enough. And so the reality has been so much better.
So all of us have had mentors, and again, I'm not blowing smoke. You were one of my big mentors. I would spend hours and hours reading and trying to understand your writing when I was younger. Who was your mentor for you?
Well, I had a whole passel of them. If you go to my web pages, Of course, reading all of the stuff I've posted on web pages might require you to bring a lunch if you're going to fairly comprehensive.
And a dictionary?
Well, perhaps. Certainly in the technical area, you might have to, do some studying. But one of the things that I've said all along is that my life as a meteorologist has been dominated by the value I got from a large number of people. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm not that inherently brilliant, but I have one trait that really has served me in good stead, and that is I can recognize good ideas when I see them and hear them. And I can.
Why are you on this show again? Sorry, I had to.
You're giving me an audience. The other thing is that I've worked with some really good people, and had the benefit of all of those good people. When you ask me about my mentors, it's a long list. It includes Walter J. Saucier, the author of Principles of Meteorological Analysis. I only had one course from him at the University of Oklahoma, but it was incredibly influential. And the man himself was hugely influential on my career. Before that, at Wisconsin, I was tremendously affected by a guy named Werner Schwertfeger, whose name you probably never heard. He was an ex-German Luftwaffe forecaster, probably was forced to be a member of the Nazi Party. He was one of the gentlest and most personable people you could ever hope to know, but he had that Teutonic sort of toughness about him. He demanded a lot from students, but he really gave students a lot in return for the effort they put in. A tremendous teacher. Curiously, one of my best teachers in high school was not in math or science. One of my best teachers was in English, in an honors English class that I was in. He was this crazy guy. We all thought he was bananas. He loved to tweak our middle-class, Midwestern sense of morality, and he would. This was at the time when Castro was still new in Cuba, and supposedly he was a big fan of Castro. I don't know if he really was, or if he was just doing it for effect. But the really nice part about him was he enjoyed sort of pushing us out of our comfort zone and forcing us to think about things that were alien to the sort of middle-class, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant backgrounds that most of us shared. So he was very important. And, of course, my graduate advisor, Dr. Yoshi Sasaki, who has recently passed away, was an incredible influence on my life. Taught me a lot about what it takes to be a scientist, about how to be a human being and be a scientist at the same time. He was brilliant at knowing what everybody needed, and sometimes it wasn't what they wanted, but it was what they needed. And he sure did that for me on more than a few occasions. For example, he forced me to overcome my math phobia. You may not realize it, but I'd had a phobia of mathematics.
You're the king of differential equations.
Yeah.
Well, I took a lot of courses in math, but basically because of Yoshi. He took a look at my transcript and saw that 5-credit D in third semester calculus. And he said, "You're going to minor in mathematics." Well, this was in an age where you wouldn't give your advisor any static. You just salute and say, yes, sir, and do it. And it turned out that I got 3 really amazingly good math professors in a row, which is perhaps one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me.
At what point did that saluting and saying yes, sir, end for you, Chuck?
When I joined the military, I discovered that most of the military officers that I had to deal with were bozos. But at any rate, so
we got enough show titles for the next 3 years on this one show. Yeah.
So I got over my math phobia, and that was a critical element in my finishing my whole graduate program. It gave me the confidence to know that I could do this. And, you know, for a kid who started out with this this deep-seated fear of mathematics, that was a big concern. So, you know, Yoshi was just a master at helping me with what I needed when I needed it. And, you know, I could go on. There's a long list of people I've worked with. Harold Brooks comes to mind. The smartest decision I ever made was to talk Bob Maddox into hiring Harold. Harold is an incredible person. He and I also had an understanding right from the very beginning. I didn't have to explain to him what we were trying to do. He just did those things without having to be told, and he got it. And so working with him was an incredibly positive experience. So, you know, there's a lot of people who affected my my career in a very positive way. If you look at my papers, most of them are collaborative pieces of work. I don't have very many sole-authored papers. And there's a reason for that. I liked working with other people. They filled gaps in my knowledge without me having to do all that work. And so I got the benefit of their insight in the papers that I was part of.
Chuck, if I can jump in here, I'd love to have you say just a couple of words about Al Moller. We lost him a little more than a year ago. And in that sort of time frame of the 80s and early 90s, that's when I was learning a lot based on reading Storm Track and reading a lot of the stories and papers and things like that I could get my hands on back then, and it was a formative experience for me. If you could just say a few words, just your thoughts about Al Moller, who we respect so much.
Well, I hope I can get through this without getting emotional about it. It's very difficult for me to do that because you know, we were friends for more than 40 years, and we chased together for a long time. Chasing with Al was a fun experience. As you might know, Al and I both had fairly strong personalities, and it was not uncommon for us to disagree about things. And so virtually every storm chase included maybe at least one shouting match per week.
I can see that.
Where we would be going at each other tooth and nail, and anybody watching it would be convinced that we were the worst enemies on the planet.
Or married.
Yeah. Yeah, that too. Yeah, if you're married, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've been married a long time. The thing about Al, he had such an incredible passion for what he did. It didn't matter what it was. He had a diverse interest, but he didn't approach anything with a half-assed way of approaching it. He was either going to be good at it or he wasn't going to mess with it at all. He was either going to be knowledgeable or he would just not mess with it. And so, you know, that sort of person provides anybody who's in his immediate vicinity with this incredible sense of excitement about what you're doing, because he had that sense of excitement, and you just couldn't help but be infected with it. Traveling with him on the road and having, I wish I could share with you a tape or a DVD of some of our storm chase trips. They were quite amusing. In when we were chasing, but there wasn't much going on, we would spend a lot of time talking about all sorts of subjects. But I got tremendous value from Al that I didn't have in my own personal experience, and that was, what is it like to be a real live 24/7 weather forecaster? And Al would explain to me how screwed up my ideas were, and he would go on at length about that and explain to me what the actual reality was. And I certainly had no reason to contest his reality. I mean, he was living it when he was on the job. But what I also came away from was this, from my conversations with him, was this incredible dedication to the public. I don't know of anyone in my experience who had that really deep passion for trying to help people, for trying to give them something that they would find to be useful and valuable and perhaps save their lives. And so he had this, he was the WCM's WCM.
Absolutely.
Before we even knew what a WCM was. Perhaps the ultimate irony was he never got selected for a WCM position. And you know why? Because he said shit that pissed people off.
Absolutely. That was Al.
He just didn't care. He said what he thought, and if you didn't like it, tough shit.
So his perspective on being a daily operational forecaster and your arguments about that, how did that change your perspective or your outlook on people in our position or people that do that in the Weather Service, if at all?
Well, it affected it in very profound ways. I would say, for one thing, that I never really understood. I only had some limited experiences with the public. Never really understood the relationship between the Weather Service and the public. The way Al explained it to me, it was outside of my personal experience, with only a few exceptions. And so, for example, it was his insight that made me recognize what it took to be an effective forecast product. And I've written a whole bunch of papers about it since then, where I've described it. In order to be effective, a forecast has to be heard by somebody. They have to understand what the heck it means. They have to believe it. They have to know what to do with it. And they have to make decisions based on it, hopefully good ones. And most of those steps are factors that are beyond the control of a weather forecaster. We're not in charge of communications. We learned about drawing weather charts and soundings and solving differential equations and writing computer programs. Most of us don't know dick about communications, and certainly not about how to make effective communications. And yet, if there's a gap in the chain that I've described, then that forecast, even if it's a perfect forecast, is useless to the users.
Bingo.
Yep.
Al made that very clear to me, and he was committed to trying to help the public try to understand what we were saying and appreciate what we were trying to offer. But of course, he had the same limitations that all of us have. He didn't know how to do most of that stuff either. But he forced me to recognize that there was this chain of events that's necessary, and any failure in that chain destroys the effectiveness of our product.
So let me ask you this. I want to, because there's been a lot of talk in the weather service circles the last few years about the need for things like decision support and for forecasters to be better communicators. And there's been some pushback. There are meteorologists from the Weather Service that say exactly sort of what you said, that we were trained to be meteorologists and to put out products that are the best meteorology and let somebody else handle the communication piece. What do you think about that? What's the future of
the NWA meeting? You're going to get an unvarnished version of my response to that.
Oh, boy.
All right. I got something to look forward to.
Yeah, I don't want to steal too much of my thunder, but let me tell you that I'm a definite believer that we should let forecasters be forecasters. You know, the job is difficult enough. If we're going to help our public understand what we're doing and appreciate what we're trying to say and all that, that's not something that we can add on to the duties of a weather forecaster. A weather forecaster has plenty of things to worry about without having to answer those kinds of questions. And of course, the forecaster has no education and no training in those topics. So forecasters should be allowed to be forecasters. There is a role then for some other professionals to help us produce more effective products. But that's not the job of the weather forecaster. Believe me, you know, even in my limited experience at forecasting the weather, it takes 100% of everything I have just to do that. And now you're telling me I've got to do more? Yeah, well, kiss my ass.
Show title right there. That's it.
That's not happening.
So, Chuck, you sat through several of these workshops and things that have come over the past few years. What's been your opinion of those? And are we making progress from any of those things?
What they do is they sit around, and first they find out that they're not speaking the same language, so they spend days trying to figure out what the other people are trying to say, because they don't understand the words the same way that they're being used. And after however many days, we have a kumbaya moment and we all hug. But at the end of all of that talk, there isn't a damn bit of actionable results we can do anything with. And I get so damn tired of hearing people talk about we need to incorporate social science. Great. When are we going to start? When are we going to start having results that we can do something with? Talk is cheap. And
so if you were head of the National Weather Service, the NOAA, what would you do right now to make that happen?
Oh, I love it when you give me these counterfactual hypotheses.
But just use your imagination.
Well,
I want to know, Chuck, you said that your NWA presentation was going to be unvarnished. So what you've done so far tonight is varnished, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, except for maybe the cursing. My goal at the NWA meeting is to stir a pot, and I think I'm going to do that. If I was head of the NWA or of the NWS, God, that's an amazing thought.
That would be awesome. I would be way too awesome.
If I was the head of the
NWS, a nightmare for some.
I would probably fire about 75% of the MICs to start.
Whoa!
Why?
Because most of them are blithering incompetents. They don't know how to manage their way out of a wet paper sack.
This reminds me of when Russell Honore came storming into New Orleans after Katrina, right? That's what Chuck's arrival at NWS was.
This is great.
Katrina.
Hmm?
I prefer to think of myself as Katrina.
So wait, no, hang on. Let's so you're saying 3 out of 4 MICs are not, that they shouldn't be in their position?
No.
Why?
Because they don't know how to manage.
So is it their science skill or is it their management skill?
It's their management skill. Look, part of the problem is that, it's part of the progression, and it's especially a progression for an incompetent forecaster to move up the management ladder, because they already know they're incompetent. By the way, one of the very best MICs that I ever met, Larry Mooney, openly said he was incompetent as a forecaster, and that was why he chose the management path.
Yep.
And I think if most MICs were honest, that's what they would say. All right, but Larry was an exception to the rule that I'm talking about, that most managers in the NWS are incompetent. Most of them think their employees are working for them. And that's a huge mistake. A competent manager would understand that the manager is working for the employees. Ken Crawford was the living embodiment of, in my opinion, the perfect NWS manager. He understood that, and this is what he told me many times. He said, how can I be successful if I haven't created an environment where my people are successful?
Yeah.
Bingo.
I've heard him say that.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. That was the way he guided his management career. And I saw the results of that, the fruits of that, in the sense that he took over an office in Oklahoma City that was essentially populated by nitwits and bozos. And he took those people and
you're being too kind, Chuck.
And he molded them into a team so that 5 years after he got to the office, and he told me this story, somebody came up to him and said, well, it's easy for you to be successful there at Oklahoma City. You got a team of superstars. Well, it was the same damn team that he had with the previous manager, and they were nitwits and bozos at that time. Well, what happened under Ken's guidance, he understood that what he had to do was to take the skills and knowledge that people had, make the most of it, and try to help them address their weaknesses as best he could, rather than trying to fit them into some pre-established stereotypical mold. He allowed them to be good at what they were good at so that they could contribute to the overall team performance. And everybody then would feel good about what they were doing, and he made sure they got rewarded for their contributions. And he never pushed himself forward at the expense of his people. And he knew, and his people knew, that if push came to shove, if there was a crisis, he was going to be in there pitching for them, for their benefit. I mean, it was an amazing thing to watch. As I said, I know a good idea when I see it, and Ken was the embodiment of a good idea. A manager works for his people, not the other way around.
So let me ask you this. Grade the performance of NSSL and SPC while we're talking weather service.
Well, NSSL was going down the toilet.
Don't beat around the bush, come out with it. Why do you say that?
Things have changed since I was there. This was all beginning to evolve as I was leaving there. I could go into the story of how and why I left, but
so this was in 01, right? When you left.
Yeah. I made the conscious decision to retire at age 55 with a full retirement and 32 years of service. at least to my credit. I got credit for my military time. When I left there, the situation, the handwriting was already on the wall. The previous concept of a federal research lab was a place where an independent research scientist who had goals and ideas could pursue those ideas without the kind of baggage that's tied to publish or perish or tenure or any of that crap that university professors have to deal with. And so you could take on long-term projects that perhaps would have a payoff 5 or 10 years in the future, but it was going to take a long time to get results. Well, that whole thing has gone down the crapper, and now we have timetables and deliverables and matrices of accomplishments, and so the whole thing has become about as far from applied science, or about as far from basic science, as it's possible to be. The lab has changed its perspective to become this deliverables-oriented, applications-based research agency, rather than what it was when I was there, where scientists were given a lot of intellectual freedom to pursue topics of their own choosing. And, you know, I think that's to the detriment of the federal laboratories. If I was going to grade the SPC, I would give them an A+. I would say the SPC, compared to what it was when I was a student trainee in Kansas City, is light years better. The people are more knowledgeable. Even the management has taken a big step forward, in my opinion. The whole organization is about as good as it's ever been. So I have nothing but the highest regard for the SPC.
Chuck, your thoughts on the new severe weather, the convective outlook risks? We've gone to the marginal and the others. What do you think of those changes they made?
That's just window dressing. I think the most important thing that the SPC has done in the last 25 years has been the probabilistic outlooks. And that was largely the result of Rich Thompson and Roger Edwards pushing that on management at the time. And it to me, it's the kind of product that I think the SPC should produce. And so, we play games with what's the most effective way to communicate that knowledge to the public, and we can argue incessantly about that. I don't see that as a particularly important meteorological question. It might be an important sociological question. How do we take that information and communicate it effectively? And I'd like to hope that at some point some of the sociology people will actually start to do something instead of just talking about it, and make some progress at communicating uncertainty. But overall, I think they're doing a fine job, and I don't see what they're doing tinkering with the existing system to be anything more than trivia.
Storm chasers. Where are we going with that?
God knows.
I sense your frustration. So after what happened with El Reno and everything else, where do we stand with this whole thing? With those that chase for profit, those that do it for research, those that just do it for fun, those that take tours out there. Where do you stand on the state of storm chasing now?
Well, storm chasing has always been characterized by a spectrum of participants. And essentially, all the participants have their own particular reasons why they do what they do. And those reasons can vary across a pretty wide spectrum. Some of them are trying to do something to advance the science. Some of them are doing it in order to have a thrilling experience. Some of them are doing it to make money. I'm involved with a chase tour, and the reason I'm involved with it is that I enjoy the heck out of introducing people to storms on the plains who have never had that kind of experience.
Well, let me stop you here, and if you don't mind, plug it. I mean, but you know, a lot of people would love to go out in the field with you. What's the name of the company if you want to share it?
Tempest Tours.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You know, I think there are three basically outfits that have some integrity: Silver Lining, Cloud9, and Tempest Tours, and all the rest of them are pretenders in terms of expertise and serious safety concerns. I'm very proud to be with Tempest Tours. The company president, Martin Licious, and I have a very perfect kind of understanding. We share a vision of what commercial storm chasing should be. Safety has to be paramount in our chasing, and if they felt otherwise, I wouldn't go with them. I'm with Tempest for a reason. I only do one tour a year because basically I don't want to do anymore. But during that time, it's a lot of fun to meet a whole bunch of people who have never seen this kind of thing before, and I can enjoy the experience almost like I was a newbie at it again through their eyes. And it's a lot of fun to do that. Plus, I've made good friends with quite a few of our clients, and we still communicate by emails, and we're Facebook friends in some cases. So the people are great. But, you know, I think chasing can be a lot of things to a lot of people, and many of those things are good. What I find disturbing, of course, are the people who choose to approach chasing as kind of a trash sport. The idea is to take as many risks as possible, short of killing yourself, just for the thrill, I guess, or for the publicity that accrues to somebody who takes those enormous risks. I see that as bad for chasing in general, but you know, there's no way I can stop it. I don't have control over the chasing community, and if I did, I wouldn't want it even if I did. So, you know, that's not what I'm about, is control. In spite of what people say, I voice my opinion about what people are doing, and I'm not very happy with some of the things I see associated with storm chasing. But it's not my job to control it, and as far as I can tell, there's no way to control it anyway. The roads are open to anybody.
Chuck, I wanted to ask you about a chase that I think you and Al did about 20 years ago, Pampa, Texas.
Yeah.
That was one of the most, this was before, obviously before social media, and that was one of the most remarkable videos that I have ever seen. Were you aware that there were vehicles flying, being ejected out of that tornado at the time?
No. It wasn't until after we reviewed the sheriff's video that I realized what was going on there. No, that chase was an amazing day. We had chased a couple of supercells in southeast Colorado the day before, and we'd been very late getting to bed that night in Lamar, Colorado. We woke up the next morning, the day of this is June 8th, 1995. We woke up in the morning, it was something like 50 degrees and drizzling in Lamar, and you know, it was, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't have to look at data to realize that, you know, we weren't going to stay there.
Yeah.
So we decided to drop south, and we got to the Texas Panhandle and broke out of the low clouds and drizzle. You could see a bunch of storms off to our east, and I called back to NSSL and talked to Harold Brooks, and Harold made a point of saying, well, they're all looking pretty good. There's supercells lined up. There's a storm that's headed towards Pampa, that if you take the road wherever we were from there to Pampa, you should be able to intercept that storm. And so that's what we did. And we drove into town, and essentially we stopped, and the tornado was forming right there in front of us. We hadn't looked at
That's what the video looks like.
Yeah.
We hadn't done dick as far as meteorology. We just waltzed into it, and it produced this incredible show right in front of us. It was just amazing, and it's not a chase that I can look back to with pride, because it was probably one of the easiest chases I ever did. We never had to exercise any brain cells. We just showed up, and it happened there in front of us, and the storm put on this incredible show.
Remarkable.
So it turned out about 9 days earlier, toward the end of May, we had worked like hell to miss a tornadic storm in Texas, but we had learned a lot of things about what it would take in order to be successful. And we put those to work on the 5th of June, 95. And Al and I were basically the only chasers who had a clear, unobstructed view up close of the Doherty, Texas tornado, which was an incredible show. And then, of course, we had no idea that 3 days later, probably the best show of our lives was going to take place with no effort, because we had worked like hell to be in the right position on the Doherty day. So from a certain standpoint, it was a lot more satisfying. But obviously, Pampa was a very special experience.
By the way, Chuck, Pampa, your video footage, or the sheriff's video footage from that, was seen by a lot of storm spotters or storm spotter trainees in Alabama, because I use that a lot.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how applicable it would have been in Alabama, but it was probably
it impressed them.
Yeah, I'm not sure you would get quite the view that we had on that storm in Alabama.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. But you know, we I think at the time had a pretty clear understanding of what we had seen. And time has only substantiated our assessment. We were incredibly fortunate to be there in the right place at the right time, and we witnessed something very special that yeah, it's up there with the top chases of my career for sure.
So Chuck,
one of the things that people ask me a lot, especially TV documentaries, is you know, what was your favorite storm chase? And what I tell them is that's like asking me which of my children I love the most. It's not really a very good question. It's really kind of a stupid question. What every storm chase where you intercept a tornado is unique. And it has its own set of specific events that resulted in seeing a tornado. On the other hand, missing a tornado or seeing nothing has a sort of monotonous sense of similarity. There's 1,000 different ways to screw up a storm chase. And it's so easy to do that. when you look at the videos, it seems like, you know, storm chasers are everywhere all the time, and they're all the time coming down with these great videos and photographs. Well, if you put enough damn storm chasers out there, somebody's.
That's true.
But a lot of them are coming away on any given day with a horrible sense of frustration and failure.
So on those times when you and Al were at each other fighting a storm chase, who was right more often, or was it 50-50?
You know, I never kept any track of that.
Oh, you must have a sense of it now.
No, I don't. I know Al was right some of the time, and I know I was right some of the time. But I never felt that it was my job to stand in judgment of his assessment. One of the things that happened when Al and I chased, you may find this hard to believe, but when he and I chased, I always deferred to him. That was my operating policy, that if push came to shove and we disagreed about something, we did what he wanted to do. And one of the reasons for that I had that policy was that I had enough decision making in the course of my daily life to satisfy me for a lifetime, and it was kind of nice to let somebody else be responsible. So that when push came to shove, we always followed his directions. Now, was he right all the time? No, absolutely not. And there were times when it was frustrating to me, when he was doing something that I thought was wrong. Most of the time, if I felt he was wrong, he was wrong. But he was also right a significant fraction of the time when I was maybe not so strongly inclined one way or the other. So I had no problem deferring to him, and you know, it doesn't lessen his abilities in any way for me to say that. I enjoyed chasing with him. At some point, and there are a lot of factors when you chase with someone that have nothing to do with meteorology that played into my choice to discontinue our chase partnership. But I've never regretted the 20 years or so that we chased together. Almost 25.
Chuck, I got to ask you one more question. I was the storm analyst at the Weather Channel when you came down there. You applied for the weather expert position.
Yeah.
Were you really interested in that job?
Well, I was curious.
I thought so.
I wanted to hear what they had to offer and what they had to say. I came away from the experience. I really enjoyed meeting most of the people that were associated with the Weather Channel and the forecasters, and so I came away with a great deal of respect for what they were doing, which I maintained. But basically, what they offered to me was flat out ridiculous. What they asked me to do was to give up storm chasing, move to Atlanta, and work for what amounted to a salary of less than $5,000 a year more than what I was already earning. Well, I'm sorry, but you know, there's no way I was going to move to Atlanta and give up storm chasing for less than $250K a year. And their offer was so far out of that ballpark that there was no way. So at that point, my decision was made. I thought I could work for them at $250K a year for 5 years, put in that time, retire as gracefully as possible, and have a hell of a good time with the money I made, chasing and all sorts of other perversions. But, they didn't come close to a reasonable offer to me. In fact, I was pretty much insulted by the offer they gave me.
So Chuck, were they close to six figures for your appearance on Weather Geeks a few weeks ago?
No.
Tell us about that. What was it like to be on there with Dr. Shepard? That was a very entertaining show.
Well, I appear on Weather Geeks because Marshall has asked me, and Marshall is a friend of mine, and what he's trying to accomplish with Weather Geeks is a goal that I support, to try to get TWC to drift back to a time when they actually cared about meteorology. And so I support. I'm more than happy to go to Atlanta and be on the show with Marshall, because I like what he's doing.
Do you think they can successfully drift, or will they not? Because one of the things I asked Dave Clark when he was here 2 or 3 weeks ago was, if you move back toward the core, is the core audience enough to support you and carry your infrastructure on a day-to-day basis outside of severe weather?
That is a really good question. I couldn't think of a more penetrating question. I don't know the answer to that.
That's why they pay me here.
Yeah.
We pay you?
Yeah.
I think it's a great it's a great question. I just don't know what the answer is.
I don't think he knew the answer either.
And associated with that, what would you say, and I got to go do TV like James, but I'll go back and listen, what would you do to help television drift more effectively into digital?
Wow, that's a question I really haven't thought much about.
Well, I'll hang up and listen later. Thanks, Chuck.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, Dr. Doswell, we appreciate your being here. How can folks get a hold of you? And you mentioned you'll be at NWA here in a couple of weeks.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how many talks are you doing?
Just one.
Okay, just the one where you will stir the pot.
Yeah.
Nice and early.
And Monday morning.
Right.
One talk. I'm the second talk following Louis Ussolini, which ought to be entertaining.
Yes.
Right.
Of that, I have no doubt.
By the way, Louis is a fellow graduate of Wisconsin. We weren't contemporaries there, but I've known Louis a long time. Yeah, well, I'll leave it at that.
How can folks get a hold of you, find you on the internet? They want to.
I'm easy. You can do a Google search on my name. My webpage will pop up. My email address is plastered all over my web pages. I'm not hard to find, and I'm not particularly adverse to people coming out of the blue and asking me even dumb questions. Yes, Virginia, there are dumb questions. What's dumber is if you don't ask them.
There you go.
No, I don't mind that. If I get a flood of emails all of a sudden, that might be an issue. But for the most part, the kinds of emails I do get, I always enjoy having people contact me and ask me questions.
Fantastic.
Or even express their opinions.
Yeah.
Sometimes their opinions are horseshit, but and I tell them that. But I don't mind that.
And hopefully they don't mind it either.
Well, some of them seem to get exercised by my responses. But my policy is simple. I give people a reasoned, measured response, and if they come back with death threats and insults, then that's the end of our communication. So that's easy.
Well,
actually, I'm frustrated because I've never gotten a death threat. It's really kind of I'm ashamed of not having been threatened with death.
We'll introduce you to Kevin Martin. We've had our share of them.
Yeah.
Well, I've run into him too, but he's never actually given me any death threats.
Wow.
I'm scared of you.
That's something that the WeatherBrains crew has gotten that Chuck Delswell hasn't, and that is a death threat from. Yeah. So anyway, well, we appreciate you being on the program this evening. We'll try and move on and handle a couple of the normal business. First, it's been a bit of a remarkable week, and let's talk about our weather roundup with Dr. John Scola.
Well, thanks, Nate. You can probably hear my cuckoo in the background.
And that's kind of how the week has been.
Yeah. A remarkable week, yeah. At least most of us in the East, it's been an astounding week, a record-setting week. It began for us here in central Pennsylvania with an unusual tornado occurring between midnight and 1 in the morning. Now, the end of September, you don't expect severe weather in Pennsylvania, least of all at that time of day. But I was called out on a survey, and we did that Wednesday morning, and sure enough, there was an EF1 tornado that had moved through 6 miles from my house. In fact, that was a predecessor to what evolved later in the week and then over the weekend. So what I found most interesting, and I've been making a lot of Facebook posts where I could put plots and talk about forecast uncertainty, and Chuck was hinting at this earlier. This was the poster child for uncertainty in terms of a tropical cyclone forecast. And that coupled with how the amplification of the eastern U.S. trough, which led to that, the rainfall in South Carolina is truly astounding. Greg Carvin put a fantastic plot together which showed how many hours of 40 dBz reflectivity that was occurring. Did you see that?
Yeah, that was incredible.
Incredible. More than 24 hours of a reflectivity return across much of the state. So you probably saw the numbers, 24 inches of rain in some locations down there.
Great write-up in Capital Weather Gang, too, about both the synoptic and mesoscale features that came together to put all this together, and the little bit of a connection with Joaquin. But that's been the big question around here is, how much of that was Joaquin versus the upper level low? And what I've told people is, without Joaquin, it would have rained a lot. Without the upper level low, it would have rained at all.
Yeah.
But Joaquin certainly helped the rainfall totals be higher than they would otherwise have been, especially across South Carolina. So
we've got the Capital Weather Gang link in the show notes, Nate.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. It's if you haven't read it yet, it's definitely worth checking out because it does sort of break down, talks about all the different players, and gets in a little bit of synoptic meteorology, which is always a good thing.
Always a good thing, right?
So, all right. Well, let's roll around the table. Let's see what else. We'll have to do email next week because Aubrey had to jump out. She's working the early shift tomorrow morning. So let's go around the horn, talk about the picks of the week. This is the segment of the show where we talk about something weather-related. Can be anything, something on the internet, a book, anything you like. And we will start with Brian Peters, who's on the far left of my screen anyway. Pick of the week, sir.
I'm not usually on the far left, but
no comment.
The one I'm picking, sticking with all this weather we had this week, is there was what I thought was a pretty interesting article in the New York Times about the Hurricane Joaquin forecast and why the U.S. weather models have fallen behind. And I think it's a pretty interesting discussion of all that's going on. So in terms of trying to promote better understanding and better computer models and all that sort of stuff. So that would be my pick.
At the risk of adding another 15 minutes to this show, Chuck, GFS, European, are we ever going to catch them?
Well, I've seen a couple of Facebook pages that have talked about that, and I think somebody, I don't remember who, has pointed out that if you look at the overall records, okay, I think the ECMWF historically has an advantage in their forecast skill, but the GFS gets a fair number of situations right as well.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I think it's not really. It shouldn't be seen in terms of this battle between the European Center and the NWS forecast models. I think the models are really gotten much better as time has gone on, and John didn't mention it, but the models did a fabulous job. Well, actually, he did mention it. That the models did a fabulous job 4 days in advance of predicting the precip in South Carolina.
Yep.
Even the GFS, even though it didn't get the Joaquin forecast all that correct. So I think that's probably an artificial conflict. I think it's clear to me that ECMWF has some real advantages compared to the NWS in terms of the way they do things and the way they're funded.
Mm-hmm.
And they clearly have better funding for better computers. But I think the U.S., the NWS is making progress, and they're not exactly amateurs at this game.
No.
So it would be wrong, I think, to characterize them as some sort of also-rans. They're not that bad.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a pick of the week?
You're asking
to share? Yes, you.
Wow.
Or we can come back around to you here at the end. Anything weather related?
I'd have to think about that.
All right. We'll come back around to you. Dr. John Scola, pick of the week, sir.
Yeah, Nate, when I was teaching, particularly when I taught the forecasting class, the students were required to read this paper. It was published in 1986, and the title of the paper was The Human Element in Weather Forecasting, written by Chuck Doswell. And if we had more time, I'd ask Chuck, that paper was written almost 20 years ago, published almost 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, 30 years ago. Are we still dealing with the same problem?
Well, I would say that, I can see the day when public sector human weather forecasters will be gone. The economics of it are kind of inexorable. And, it's very discouraging to me to see that prospect, because I've spent my whole career trying to help humans do a better job. I haven't been that involved in model development. So to see that happen is discouraging to me, but I think the logic of it from a purely economic standpoint is pretty hard to escape.
Mm.
Human forecasters are expensive, models are cheap. And even if the models are not quite as good as what humans could be, we have done our best as human forecasters to fail, to live up to our own expectations. Too many forecasters are content to take the model and just puke it back more or less verbatim. The Len-Snellman meteorological cancer problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've spent 20+ years telling people you're killing your own opportunity for employment. But it falls on mostly deaf ears. I don't know of any way to stop that. So regrettably, I think there will come a time when human forecasters, if they exist, will be found only in the private sector.
Wow.
Morgan Palmer, pick of the week, sir.
Looking at some storms along the West Coast, there's a website that has been around for quite a few years called the Storm King, and it takes a look at extratropical cyclones, of course, up here in the Northwest, and some big storms of historical note up here in the Pacific Northwest and along the West Coast. And so if you ever want to kind of point your gaze out west, it's some interesting reading with good write-ups about notable storms going all the way back to the late 1800s.
Very cool. My pick of the week is a sequel to a storm video. It was published by Michael Binsky, who is a storm videographer and photographer out generally in the western part of the country, called Monsoon 2. It's about 10 minutes. It's in HD, and I strongly recommend that you use your Chromecast or Apple TV or Amazon Fire or Roku or whatever you got to throw that to the biggest screen you have in the house and put it in HD. It is 10 minutes, and it is incredible. Good watching. All right, Chuck, you have a pick of the week for us? If not, I have a backup pick.
Well, I'm gonna unfortunately shamelessly plug my own stuff.
No shame in that.
No,
here.
we do that all the time.
Okay, I would like to recommend the paper I wrote with Harold Brooks and Bob Maddox in 1996, I believe. It's called Flash Flood Forecasting and Ingredients-Based Methodology. And the basic principle of ingredients-based forecasting is exemplified in the task of forecasting flash floods. And this particular episode that we've just been through in South Carolina is a perfect example of a flash flood that occurs in a weather pattern that is perhaps unprecedented in its capacity to produce a flash flood. If you were doing pattern recognition, you would never have guessed the sort of evolution that was going to go on. Now, it turns out the models did a great job with it, and that's more to their credit. But I've always been a big fan of ingredients-based forecasting from the first time I heard about it. So I'd like to recommend that as a place for your followers to go and perhaps read about a different way to approach forecasting.
I'll second that. I remember during my undergraduate days at NC State, that was required reading during our forecasting course, and it has served me well in my career up to date. So,
great.
All right. Well, we have gone around the table. I think we've crossed off all the major business. We've got a regular program next week, and then 2 weeks hence we'll be live at the
This was an irregular program.
This is true. We're all about irregular programming here.
Chuck, none of our programs are regular, so don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we'll be live from the National Weather Association annual meeting 2 weeks from tonight. That puts us on Monday, October 19th from the National Weather Center. Really excited about that program coming together. And then we've got a pretty full calendar. I'm already planning shows into January. So this is good stuff. Got a lot of stuff coming on here in the next few weeks and on into the rest of the year. If you have any suggestions, or if you'd like to have something on the program, a guest suggestion, for example, shoot it an email to us, email@weatherbrains.com. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook. We're at WeatherBrains on both of those places. And we'd love to get your comments both via email and on iTunes and Stitcher. That's where you can find the podcast version. We normally produce the program Monday nights, 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern via Google Hangout. You can always watch live.bigbrainsmedia.com. Until next week, on behalf of the panel, I am not James Spann. Good night and God bless.
All right,
thanks. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks.
Well done.
Yes, thank you.
A pleasure as always, sir.
See you in 2 weeks, Chuck.
You bet. Looking forward to it.
I'll be there.
Great.
Take care.
Cheers.
Y'all take care.
See
Bye.
ya.
Listen, the show might be going on here. I'll just go in here quietly. They still could be on the air. If it is, we'll have to abbreviate Periscope here. Oh, they're done. Wow. All right, so this is where it's kind of weird. We got two streams going on here. Let me turn the camera back on. So, hello. This is WeatherBrains. What a show tonight. Goodness. Great to have Dr. Doswell on. And I didn't get to hear the end of it because I had to go do television. And we're periscoping, by the way, if you wanted to, for Song of the Night. The song I picked tonight was Rock and Roll Band by Boston. Wow. So the theme this week on Song of the Night, it's songs with cities in the title of the song or in the title of the band. So that's the reason I picked Boston. No, I'm going to go back and listen to this show again. Chuck is a very, very interesting person, and I appreciate his willingness to come on this show and talk. So one nice thing about WeatherBrains, we've got time where, with some of the other formats, it is so tight. We can just sit here and talk, and it was great to do that. So I'm going to turn off the stream. We'll see you guys next week on WeatherBrains. Y'all have a good week. Bye.